Hello and welcome to the Fair Play podcast. I'm Tom Pimenta, a member of the sports team here at Pennington's Manchester Cooper. We're excited to be launching our second series of this podcast. If you listened to our first series, you'll know we spoke to lots of interesting people and focused on women in sport. In this second series, Going for Gold, we're looking at the road to becoming an elite athlete to try and understand what it takes to compete at the highest level of sport. We'll look at a range of stages in the pursuit of gold, from the discovery of talent, the training and coaching processes, getting the funding needed to compete, qualification, the competition itself, and what next when an athlete is forced to give up their dream and take a different path. In our first episode, I'm joined by my co-host today, Louise Taylor, who's also a member of our sports team and specialises in personal injury claims.
Hi, everyone.
With the Paris Olympics now underway, we're very excited to start the series off with some stories from past Olympic and Paralympic competitors, British champions, and those who support athletes to achieve their goals. We've got some great guests lined up, from a Paralympian with an inspiring story who we'll hear from shortly, to a 1500 metre who sadly never made it to the Olympics due to overtraining. She has a really, really interesting story too, so do look out for future episodes as they're released. We'll also be talking to a British weightlifter, a Paralympian with an OBE once described as Wales' best archer, and an Olympic basketball player. So we've got some really exciting episodes to come.
And we're delighted to be joined today by Alistair Patrick-Heselton, who has a fascinating story in sport. Alistair was a promising youth footballer for Wycombe Wanderers and then for Queen's Park Rangers. He was a prolific forward at under-17 level and reached the reserve team before a cruciate ligament injury, sustained while on loan at Oldham Athletic, ended his QPR career. Alistair played for a number of other teams, including for Dutch First Division Helmond alongside Working, before he was in a serious car accident in 2006. Tragically, his best friend died in the accident and Alistair fractured his skull. Alistair was in a coma for 2 months after the accident before being told that he would never walk again. Just 4 years later, he was selected for the England and ParalympicsGB Cerebral Palsy and other brain injury team. He went on to represent ParalympicsGB at the 2011 CP ISRA Championships, the 2012 BT Paralympic World Cup, and played in the 2012 Paralympic Games. Alistair played for ParalympicsGB from the 2011 to 2016 and was inducted into the National Football Museum Hall of Fame in 2017. Thank you very much for coming in today to discuss your journey, Alistair.
Massive thank you for having me, and I look forward to it.
So Alistair, starting with our theme is about obviously the games and the journey to that. What was your first memory, perhaps as a fan of the Olympics and Paralympic Games?
Well, I remember it right from my youth days, and always thinking that's the biggest stage that you could ever play on. And I'd always try and compare the Olympics and Paralympics with what to me was my biggest thing, football being the World Cup and those sort of moments. So I'd always think, what's bigger, a World Cup or an Olympics or Paralympics? And for me, it was always the World Cup. However, who haven't been lucky enough to actually compete, I've now realised that it's probably the Olympics and Paralympic Games.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, particularly in football, isn't it? With the difference between there's obviously that debate with I think it's happening with the French team currently. Obviously, it's in Paris. Can Thierry Henry select certain players from the French team because it's such an honour to play at the Olympics, or is it kind of clash with their seasons when it starts and things like that as well? So I think it's a clear battle at the moment, really. Definitely.
I've always thought, though, if you're the best in England, then the only step higher could be to then make it for Great Britain. So I do think that there's a real talk on that, and I don't think it's maybe high enough on the agenda.
No, I agree, definitely.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks, Alistair. And going back to your own personal story, when did you know you first wanted to be a footballer? And I suppose, when did you realise you were on the path to making it at Wycombe and QPR?
I would have been about 4 or 5 years old when I realised football was what I wanted to do, because I'd just come to England from Dominica. And sitting with my dad, the first time I ever saw football on TV was when it was Liverpool playing Portsmouth, and John Barnes hit the post and Jan Welby scored the follow-up. But seeing the whole stadium erupt just for that small thing at that moment, I couldn't really work out what had driven them to do that. My dad told me a bit about it, but when I always say come from England to Dominica, the stadium that erupted held more people than the population of Dominica. So I was actually thinking, wow, that has to be something really good they've just done. And it was from that moment I knew I really wanted to be a professional footballer. And you just take part at school and you enjoy it with your friends, which is always the main thing, you know, just having fun and a good time. And we try and relive those moments of scoring goals, and we'd be recreating all the celebrations at school. And in my first football season as that youngster playing for my first team, Pinner Albion, I scored 64 goals in 28 matches. And I think that's maybe when I thought, do you know what, maybe it could happen. And when we talk about inspirational figures, there was an ex-Tottenham footballer, Steve Perriman. He did our sports awards where I got Player of the Year. And he like took some time out to talk to me and said, you keep going and keep that smile on your face. You could be a really good footballer. It was almost from that moment I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Wow, that's amazing.
Must have been quite something getting that you know, that recognition as well from a former pro, particularly.
I didn't even realize. For me, it was just, oh, I'm here with my friends and I've just done this. My mum and dad are there to see me get this trophy, and it was just wow for me. And then when you hear someone say that, it's only as you get older and you realize just who he was and what he'd achieved, you then realize actually maybe I was actually really good back then.
Yeah.
And did that go on to scouting and things like that? Was that soon after where you were scouted? And you know, so yeah, it's not always an odd term found, you know, in the when you're coming through the youth ranks and then get spotted.
As a child, your progression, you can always always stutter depending on just on how you mature and how you grow. And I was always a very small child, and there were always kids who were a lot bigger than me playing, but I didn't feel were better than me, but they could kick the ball a bit further, or they seemed more of a physical presence on the football field at that age. But then I progressed because I went on to represent my borough and then the county. And so you think, oh, it's all going well, but then all of a sudden you fall back slightly, but I suppose the difference is when you keep going and the same people that were ahead of you, but then they get knocked back and then they don't come back, whereas you just keep returning and keep doing your thing. And it was at 13, 14, I then got scouted for Wycombe Wanderers. And that was just, I say the off chance, but some things are meant to happen, because this particular coach there, he had been the coach at Queen's Park Rangers, and I'd actually been with their centre of excellence first before my dad said, oh, Alistair, we're too busy, we can't get you to training. So I stopped playing. But his dad was also a very well-renowned scout at QPR. His son then got the job at Wycombe, and he said, oh, if you want to build your team, I know a really good player who's available at the moment. I mean, he lives fairly locally, so if traveling to training was going to be a problem, well, you could offer to take him to and from training. And that's sort of how it worked out. John Nolan was his name, and the rest is history, because he really believed in me, and we built a fantastic young squad at Wycombe as well.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I suppose there's also and then you're building at that stage. You're getting, I suppose, each stage, as you've said, you know, you started with your local team, you then get to county, and you're building through those ranks. And did you find it was a gradual? You were just on a football pitch. There was just, you're part of a team of 11 against a team of 11, or whatever numbers it was at the time, and you just kept adapting to the next pitch or the next level, or did it feel like a step up each time when you moved?
I think it was always an adaptation, because I don't think there was ever one moment that I ever thought I wasn't good enough to be there, or I couldn't add anything to the team. Although some people might try to make you feel as though that's the case. However, for me, it was never like that. And again, I certainly remember we were just all such good friends as well. And you have to remember, if we all got together for Middlesex, for example, most of the season we were playing against each other for our districts, and then we get together for Middlesex, and then we'd enjoy that celebration. Then we'd be seeing the same people at our end of season tournaments and things like that, and we have all the banter that you would, or fun you would have as kids, and it was just a constant state of enjoyment, really. But then it got very fierce once we were on the pitch.
Right.
That is great. And moving on to obviously it's progressing really well. And then all of a sudden you have the cruciate ligament injury. Did you realize the significance of it at the time, or and how did you cope in the sort of short and long term?
Yeah, that had come quite interesting because that was after a fantastic, first 2 seasons at QPR where I've done very well, and then started playing in the reserves quite regularly. The first team, unfortunately, we had the relegation where the club went into administration, and my saving grace was Ian Dowie. He ended up going off to Oldham Athletic and decided to get me on loan there, which was brilliant, and another opportunity. And for me, again, I was scoring freely there, and things were looking really good. And then initially, when it was the cruciate ligament injury, we didn't realize just how severe it was. I don't think because it took quite a long time, because we only got that confirmed when I was back at QPR. Went through the medical departments down here, being closer to home, and then we found out what it was, which again, it wasn't the end of the world, because just like everything I'd done prior, well, okay, what do I need to do? How long will it take? And I'll just get back on that path of recovery, which I then did. And timing wasn't great because, like I say, the club were in administration. They were trying to alleviate the pressure on the finance books and things like that. A new manager came in that then doesn't get to see you playing as often as you'd like, or you don't get the chance you feel you deserve, but these things happen, and that's just how it went. So it's, do I say it's was at the end? Well, it wasn't the end, as we know, because I went on to play in Holland afterwards, but certainly in terms of timing and in hindsight, would I have done a few things differently? I probably would have, but hey, we can't always live in the past.
Interesting. Yeah. What do you mean about what you might have done differently?
Well, medically, in terms of the reconstruction, because at the time it was stem cell surgery was only just in its infancy. Right. I decided to have the hamstring graft, whereas once you have that hamstring graft, they always talk about, oh, you always lose a yard of pace.
Right.
And that's actually physically, because when the hamstring grows back that they graft out, it always grows back slightly shorter than it was previously. Right. And therefore, you don't get the same extension and flexion in the leg, so you always lose that yard of pace. And
right.
Had you had stem cell, well, the rest of you would be intact, and you don't lose that length, if you like. So who knows if I'd have said, okay, let's go down this route.
Yeah. Although if it was early and it's as you say, in its infancy, then you don't know.
Yeah.
Gone. Yeah. Like one more question, I suppose, in the path, if you're happy to talk about it, Alistair, is just a little bit about your accident, 2006. What you remember of it, if anything, and what happened after that?
Yeah, in terms of the accident itself, I don't remember anything of it. I remember what people would tell me. But to me, it was just the most bizarre feeling, waking up in Charing Cross Hospital, not even realizing you're in a hospital, or you just come out of a coma, or anything at all. So it was pretty scary at that time.
Yeah, I bet.
But then with everything, I can only go on the facts and what I was told by family, friends, doctors. And then I realized that it's going to be a long road to recovery, and all you can do is just set on that path,
Yeah. Wow. Amazing attitude. And following that accident, you pursued a personal injury claim. I understand. And what can you just tell us a little bit about what that involved, and how long it took to deal with what happened? Again,
I think the personal injury claim was always going to be inevitable, because you then realize there's so much that you can't do that you are doing, just simple things like, well, when you think I'm supposed to be going to work on Monday, no, you're not. Well, okay, when can I go to work? Well, probably not for quite a few years, So it was just one thing. We got in touch with a legal firm to represent myself, and it was where I met Warren Collins. I don't know if you know him.
We know Warren.
Again, not only did he represent me, but it was his whole advice around not just the whole process, but for going forward, and being myself and trying to live normally again.
Yeah. And did you get things like was the rehabilitation good in terms of in the beginnings of that claim? Did you get access to various therapies and things, or was that part of your NHS treatment anyway?
Rehabilitation, it's funny you say that, because I know, and thankfully the NHS, the ambulance service responded and got me into hospital, but I was in an NHS ward for a bit too long, because I did actually have Bupa cover at the time.
Right.
And once they then realised, they then moved me to another
Right.
moved me
Okay.
to another ward, which was
Okay.
fine. But no, all the rehab and everything else went very well, and I couldn't really have asked for better care.
Cool. And how long would you say that recovery took? So for the accident being in 2006, when were you kind of, well, I suppose we can see from your then Paralympic career, but when did you feel that you were sort of, when did you got back to recovery at peaked recovery?
I honestly don't think I ever really saw the benefits or the real improvements in recovery until I started playing football again. Because I
Right.
think when I recovered enough physically to be able to play football, yeah, I was living life normally and thinking things were great. But it's only all the acute things that once I then reintegrated sport and football back into my life, 2011, I then realized just how much better I got just as a person. And I could goal set all over again and just be completely independent. And it gave
Wow.
me whole new things to aim for, you know?
Wow, that's really amazing. Yeah, so it's like that bit was sort of missing from your cognitive functioning when you weren't doing it, which had been so
Sure.
you from younger years. Wow, that's
And
amazing.
I know you asked me about how long the sort of process would take. I always remember Warren telling me it's going to be about 3 years.
Yeah.
I looked at my dad and we're thinking, hang on, 3 years, that's ages. Like, you know,
Yeah.
what can happen in 3 years? But no, even when I look back on it now, it all went so quickly, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's really interesting.
So, I mean, Alistair, discussing all those, how you're adapting to different changes. I mean, one of the things that comes through is the, you're moving up the different pitch levels at different stages with Wickham and then obviously QPR. You're adapting to the cruciate ligament injury, and then obviously the way you talk about your recovery from your car accident. It shows a real level-headedness, a real maturity of, well, okay, what do we need to do, and actually can we beat that time frame? That's a long time. And doctors saying you might never walk again. Does that sort of thing inspire you? Does that push you to go to that next level? I mean, one of the key things we're exploring in this particular series is how athletes adapt if one route gets blocked and you've got to find another diversion and things like that. I mean, do you feel that these previous setbacks that you've then overcome, or previous challenges that you've then overcome, did they help you plan and reroute your sporting career after your accident?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think we are very good at what we practice. And for me, it was always getting up when you're knocked down, you know? So I always say that it was probably tougher or more tough for my parents because it was them that were told I may never walk again. And upon waking up, I don't think they ever let me believe that I wouldn't walk again. It was always my dad who'd put my bed controls at the end of the bed and be telling me, try and kick it off. And once I could kick it off, I never stopped, you know? And I think that me hearing that news, I'll never, how can I, of all people, not walk again, not going to walk again? And it was, almost seamless once I started putting some weight on my feet. I could actually, bear the weight. It was difficult, but then I thought, well, okay, I just need to get stronger legs, do more weight on them, just do it more, and that's how we get better.
Wow.
I mean, that is the elite mentality that you've had to get to that level with sport. I think it sounds like it's helped a lot to recover from that as well.
Yeah, I mean, there were times I do remember the only thing I could really do that never hurt me was just open and close a hand like that. I just remember to myself, I could do this every day and I could do it better than anybody else, So it was always that, it was always the mind that just wanted to practice. My mom was always surprised because one of the injuries I had, my shoulder had come out of the socket, and I would always be writing with my left hand at the time, and family worried that my handwriting was so scrappy. And why does he keep writing with his left hand, even though he can now use his right? I thought, well, if my right's a bit weak, I can still practice with my left and make it that bit better, And they're like, wow, why are you so dedicated to excellence all the time,
Yeah, so that's the competitive spirit that you need, I guess, to be such a good person. Absolutely, it's very impressive. So are you now ambidextrous?
No, I'm not quite ambidextrous, but I can always say I can do tasks if I need to. I'm not a total failure,
Very cool. Cool. Okay. And moving on to the Paralympics, how did you feel when the then England and ParalympicsGB Paralympic coach Lyndon Lynch contacted you and suggested that you got involved in the Cerebral Palsy team?
At first, hearing it, I just thought, this isn't for me. I have changed my life now. I do things completely differently, and I turned my back on football. I wouldn't say sport, but on football, because for me, I can't head a ball anymore. And there are all these players that still play that I don't think are any good, and they don't really seem to appreciate the opportunity they've got. And maybe it's not for me. It's when Lyndon got in touch, and it was just quite a, I wouldn't say divine intervention, but things just work out the way they're supposed to, because he was actually told about me through the England Cerebral Palsy club doctor, or doctor at the time, who was Richard Vila. Right. And he had been the Watford club doctor with Simon, who was driving the car that we were in. And it was him that actually said, well, hang on, he was in the car with the Queen's Park Rangers footballer that would qualify to play in this team now, maybe reach out to Alistair. And that's what happened. And ever since then, Lyndon said, Alistair, maybe just educate yourself a bit about the sport. You can wear a headguard, and it's adapted for players that have had setbacks to be able to compete. And so I did, and learned a bit more, and said, okay, I'll play for England at the upcoming, or try to get classified at the upcoming World Championships, CP World Championships, which we did. And knowing my luck, I'll say I scored our first goal on my England debut, and that was almost like straight away I thought, okay, maybe this is for me,
Wow, brilliant.
You mentioned working towards obviously getting a particular classification, how that all works. Can you tell us a bit about the process, what was involved with that? Because obviously the difference, I suppose, is if you're say going for the Olympics, it's probably the focus is purely on your time. Are you have you got the relevant time? Have you got the relevant distance? Have you got the relevant weight or whatever it is, the categorization there? What is the classification like, say for the Paralympics that you experienced?
Yeah, that's probably the I don't know how I should say this. It's probably the most contradictory factor in the Paralympic Games, if you like. There is classification, but we have to remember the Paralympics was founded on rehabilitating people. And when you've got a classification process in place like this, it can almost make people want to qualify, make them actually try and cut back on their rehabilitation or recovery to present in a certain way. Now, with cerebral palsy football, we had a C5 to a C8 in my day, which is if you're a C5, you're the most impaired by your disability. So someone with cerebral palsy, it may have been they were affected in both limbs, so they can do left or right side. Whereas a CA would be least affected, which I classified as a C8, which is generally a brain injury where it's a balance impairment, or you visually track things slightly slower. Now, for classification, it benefited, and the way the rules were formed, it benefited us to try and get me classified as low as possible. So then, because you can't have any more than 2 C8s on the team at any one time, or on the pitch at any one time. So, if we can get someone through as a 7, then that makes it all right, even though they're technically an 8. If someone's actually an 8 and they could present us without these impairments at all, where do we go? And for me, it was always quite tricky, because my first classification, there were some doctors arguing that I shouldn't be playing because I didn't display enough deficit, until they saw the brain scans that I have, and they say, well, these brain scans can't be for this person here, because and it's one of those things. But then the argument around that was just my past ability and that sort of muscle memory, if you like, that helps me be a certain way. And it's so much so because then even after London, after Rio, there's then talk that people were turning off the cerebral palsy football because they couldn't work out why it was a Paralympic sport, because you've got young people that are running around, or older people running around like normal. So there is no impairment. But again, it's very short-sighted in terms of how disability can manifest itself. So it's one of these things, and it's a big political debate in itself.
Yeah, I think it's really challenging line to draw, isn't it? In terms of you want it, as you say, Paralympics is all about rehabilitation. It's about being competing in a sport despite what's happening in the
overcoming setback.
And I mean, it must be quite interesting in, say, the cerebral palsy team that you've got people at different levels of impairments. I mean, some of the, say, if it was one of the individual events, I mean, it's good if it's a different angle, isn't it, rather than a team event, because the individual event, you have to make sure that everyone in the at the starting blocks, I suppose, in a race or something, is broadly similar impairment. But it's quite an interesting approach with the team to have, you can have this many people at this at each different level, really. So
and again, I think that's something that would need to be almost analysed to the nth degree. And I say that because myself, someone with a sort of brain processing power that's slightly slower, but then when you add someone in your team with they're affected on the left hand side, and then you put that in a football match, and if I pass it to the weaker side of my teammate, it's going to be 10 times harder. But then I'm trying to analyze which teammate was this one, and and then that's where things start evening up. And I just don't think people are actually educated enough to actually break down just what's going on and what people are having to compete with,
And I mean, the whole thing you said about as well, some impairments are invisible, like you say. You may present in a way that you're more able to move around and run a bit easier than someone else, but at the same time, as you say, you're thinking, okay, who was this player? The one, their weak, their right side or their left side? Is this someone who wants? I mean, similar sort of things that different players in any team. Someone likes the ball passed to their feet because they want to control it and dribble away. Others want it kicked in front of them so they can run onto it and use their pace.
And what you have to remember, Tom, is I'm being pushed at the same time whilst trying to hear 3-4 voices at the same time. Plus your manager shouting from the side, and then whatever's going on in the crowd. So it's very mind-boggling. I used to come off a bit shattered at times.
Yeah, of course. And how did it feel to represent your country, to score a goal for your country, and to get to know the team? I mean, that must have been quite a feeling. Yeah.
Again, I just had to rely on all the old memories that I had of what it was like to be like in that team environment again, and almost the hustle and bustle of wanting to, compete, take someone's place effectively, and not let anyone else take your place. And I suppose that's what really drove me on. And it was the fact that it wasn't like, not orchestrating, that you have to really be present and give it your all to be there.
And what would you say the sort of similarities and differences with the CP team compared to, say, other teams that you've been with before? What's the dressing room like and things? I mean, I suppose one of the things people often say is why football is such a popular sport is that it's such a universal thing that so many people can get involved with at all different stages of life, but also anywhere in the world, really. How did you find it was the similarities there?
Again, the first similarity, and I think whenever we're talking about excellence, is the outside world. They'll see the game on a Saturday or midweek and everything, and they think this is what footballers do. But for myself, for the actual footballer to be there, no, it doesn't happen on a Tuesday and Saturday. It's because as soon as you go home, you're straight into training, and that's when you're making sure you prepare your body and you manage your body so you can be the best you at the next session and for the next session after that, and you're just always on that sort of wheel, if you like. And for me, that's something that's always really driven me, the fact that you're just always on it.
Right. That's very cool.
And when I talk about the Paralympic side, sorry, it's no different. I think that's one thing that I did fall back on for me to integrate so well and quickly with the Paralympic side was I actually thought, no, I'm going to have to bring that elite standard and mentality here, which is we don't stop. And that's exactly what I tried to do. Yeah.
Fascinating. Totally. Talking of some of your many successes, you scored a goal in the World Cup final defeat to Brazil in 2012. And then you played in the 2012 Paralympic Games. Which was the bigger experience for you?
Oh, for me, definitely the Paralympic Games, because the BT World Cup was almost the interlude to the Paralympics, which was almost like a tune-up just to get ready. And for me, Paralympics, definitely the one.
particularly on the home, your home games as well. It must have been quite
Yeah.
something once in a generation, really, opportunity.
Nothing can recreate that. I mean, when we had the Heroes Parade, they were 2 million people, like, in the streets, just watching us on the open top buses, and just the whole occasion, the way the whole nation got behind everything was just absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, I think, and as you've seen a lot, more than a lot of people, I suppose, sport and life can obviously throw a lot of different things at us, when we least expect it. And it's obviously moments like that open top bus parade, enjoying that's what you've worked for. I mean, but I mean, looking back at, say, on the football side of things, I mean, to go from, say, academy prospect, first team footballer is extremely difficult, even before factoring injury and things like that, just the competition that's involved there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Liverpool footballer Trent Alexander-Arnold recently launched the After Academy program for players who look to forge a career path outside of football. I mean, as someone who's reinvented yourself as a quantity surveyor, a Paralympian, and obviously now motivational speaker, what would your message be to listeners who suffer a setback in life, and how to adapt?
Again, for me, I think it's the case of never giving up. That's always the first and foremost. It's that sort of self-belief that you have to have. And when I say self-belief, it's very easy for anyone else to want to doubt you and everything else. But no matter what, just always keep that belief in yourself and, like, your true values and motives. Now, I know Trent's after academy, the after player care that he wants to run with, it's a fantastic idea. I think anyone that wants to, reinvent themselves or go into next things, it can sometimes be difficult if they've always had that sort of closed mindset. Now, when I was a young footballer, my parents were solicitors, and they'd always told me, Alistair, keep your options open. But then on one hand, you're told, well, I want to be a footballer. Like, how can I keep my options open? But it doesn't mean you turn away from being a footballer. But you can be good at football. You can be good at something else as well. So I was always someone that tried to absorb as much knowledge as I could. And I think that's the key for anyone listening. I'll say just try and absorb as much as you can and take in every experience that you get as well as you can.
Wow.
Nice.
I can hear the motivational speaker in you, feeling very inspired, Alistair. And as a final point, what would you like prospective Paralympians to take from your story? And what's the key to your success? And what do you think they can learn from your experiences specifically?
Okay, we talk about prospective Paralympians. There was never one moment where I thought I was going to be a Paralympian. There's never one moment I thought in anything that I do now, it's for me to go on to be a Paralympian. It was always just so I could live the best life that I could. Let me do something that, like, I'm truly happy with, and I can't say at the end of my life that I didn't do enough. So anything that you feel passionately enough about, give it your all. That's all I can ever say. And I can tell you then the same thing my mum told me when I was 6, and David Beckham also told me, is if you don't enjoy something, what would be the point? So try and find enjoyment in what you do first and foremost.
Yeah, it's really inspiring. I mean, you mentioned as we throughout as well, your the advice from Sarah Perriman was saying how if you're doing that and enjoying it that much, you're going to go far. And I suppose there's that keeping that smile on your face while you're doing these things. Yeah, seems to be something that's come through with you the whole way.
Always, and I always, funny enough, Louise, I say this to people very much at the moment, because the night I was inducted in the National Football Museum Hall of Fame, they got a great picture of me receiving the award, but I just had the biggest smile on the side of my face. And it's when I look back on it, like my whole, not just that moment, but my whole career, that's probably how much I've enjoyed everything that I've done. And I think if I'd finished my career and I didn't, well, no matter what I've achieved, what would have all been worth anyway, So I always say, try and seek enjoyment in what you do, and it's that truly takes you on to where you want to be.
Yeah.
Alistair, thank you. That's been absolutely amazing to go through your experiences, and I think there's a lot that people coming through in any sport or even in any walk of life. I know I'm going to be applying this to my work.
Yeah, same. To my lawyering.
Sure, it's no, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you as a guest on our podcast. Yeah, no, thank you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Thanks, Alistair. And if anyone has any questions for you or wants some more motivational inspiration, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Alistair Patrick-Heselton, or I was just about to say Twitter, but my X tag is now APH_inspired.
So thank you everyone for listening. We'll be writing a follow-up article on some of the issues raised during this podcast. But if you have any questions or want to discuss it further, please contact us on our sports podcast email address, sportspodcasts@penningtonslaw.com, or get in touch with one of your co-hosts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.